everyone, good morning. In the last class, we started the story, The Mysterious Picture, and we discussed a few paragraphs in it. Do you remember the things that we discussed in the last class? Here are some points that we discussed in the last class. Let's have a look at these points. My first point, Tile reached at the palace of Archduke of Battenberg. Tile was in the course of his wandering from one palace to another, and finally he reached at the palace of Archduke of Battenberg. And the second point, Tile is a painter from Flanders. When the captain of the guard asked where he was from, Tile replied that he is from Flanders and he was a painter and he would like to present one of his pictures to the Archduke of Battenberg. Then, after hearing Tile was a painter and he was from Flanders, captain of the guard impressed and he agreed to let him go inside the palace and meet Archduke of Battenberg, and the Tile was presented in front of Archduke of Battenberg. Then Tile wished to become the court painter. Actually, Tile wished to become the court painter of Battenberg, the palace of the Archduke of Battenberg, and to get that appointment, get that position, he used his wily movements, cunning movements, and when he presented the picture of Virgin Mary, he used some tricky words or the words that includes humor sense to attract the Archduke's attention and kindness on him. And finally, he succeeded in it. Okay. Then Archduke made Tile as his court painter. Actually, Archduke impressed on Tile and he made Tile as his court painter. These are the points that we discussed in the last class. Are you ready to go through the rest of the story? Okay, let's start today's class here, and I am going to read the next two paragraphs and we will discuss the contents in it later. Okay, first let's read the paragraph. Listen very carefully and go through your textbook while I am reading the text. Okay, here you are. Your Highness, may it please you to remember me and my donkey, Jeff, for just one more minute? Tile replied. My donkey has been feeding himself fairly well all along the way on the thorns in the hedges and the grass on the roadside. But I have had nothing to eat for the past 3 days. My stomach has been complaining very loudly. Perhaps your Highness can even hear it now. I have been feeding myself with the dreams of good food and drink at your royal table. The Archduke smiled and said, Well, my dear fellow, you will certainly have something more solid than dreams to feed on. But where is your donkey? I left him outside, opposite the palace. I shall be most grateful if Jeff is looked after. He needs a little fodder and lodging at night, said Tile. The Archduke immediately ordered the donkey to be taken care of, and he added, Treat it like one of my own animals. Before long, supper was served and it was like a wedding feast. The tables were loaded with every kind of food and drink. Wine flowed like water. The courtiers stuffed themselves with the choicest dishes. The Archduke made Tile eat and drink until his stomach was about to burst. The Archduke too ate heartily. His face was flushed with drink, but he seemed lost in thought. He suddenly looked up and said loudly, Our court painter must paint our portrait, so that we will have the satisfaction of leaving our memory to our descendants. We too have to take our place in history along with our noble ancestors whose portraits adorn these walls. It is sad to think of deaths. We do not know when God will think fit to summon us, but our portrait should be painted. Have you finished reading with me? I think you have? Then, let's discuss. I would like to ask you some questions. Can you tell me the name of the donkey of Tile? What is the name of Tile's donkey? Yes, it's Jeff. And do you think Tile and his donkey are hungry? Do you think that's so? Yes, we can say the donkey was not hungry. What is the reason? Because the donkey had been feeding himself fairly well along the way to the palace. He had been feeding himself with the thorns in the hedges and the grass on the roadside. But Tile was hungry. And he said that, look at that sentences, Tile said that for the past 3 days he had nothing to eat for the past 3 days. Tile said like that. He had nothing to eat for the past 3 days. കഴിഞ്ഞ 3 ദിവസമായിട്ട് ടൈലിന് എന്ത് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റിയിട്ടില്ല, ഒന്നും കഴിക്കാൻ പറ്റിയിട്ടില്ല. But his donkey had been feeding himself with the thorns in the hedges and grass in the roadside along the way to the palace. എന്നാൽ പാലസിലേക്ക് വരുന്ന വഴി ഡോങ്കി എന്ത് ചെയ്യായിരുന്നു? വരുന്ന വഴിയുള്ള പുല്ലും മുള്ളും ഒക്കെ കഴിച്ചുകൊണ്ടേ വരികയായിരുന്നു. So he was not hungry. The Jeff was not hungry, but child was very hungry. And look at that sentences he added. His stomach had been complaining very loudly. Perhaps his highness can even hear it now. His stomach had been complaining. വയറിങ്ങനെ എന്ത് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്? പരാതി പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. എനിക്കൊന്നും തിന്നാൻ തരുന്നില്ലല്ലോ എന്നൊക്കെയുള്ള പരാതി ആര് പറയുന്നുണ്ട്? ടൈലിന്റെ വയറ് പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. ഒരു പക്ഷെ ആർക്ക് കേൾക്കാം? ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്ക് ഓഫ് ബാറ്റൻബർഗിന് വരെ കേൾക്കാം എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുകയാണ്. ആര്? ടൈൽ. എന്തിനായിരിക്കും അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്? എൻ്റെ വയറ് കംപ്ലൈൻറ്റ് ചെയ്യുകയാണെന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞത് എന്തിനായിരിക്കും? യെസ്, Tile wished to get, maybe Tile wished to get good food and drinks from the court of Battenberg, Archduke of Battenberg. പാലസിൽ നിന്നും നല്ല ഫുഡ് കിട്ടുകയാണെങ്കിൽ കിട്ടിക്കോട്ടെ എന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചിട്ടാണ് ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ ആര് പറയുന്നത്? അതിനുള്ള തെളിവ് അവിടെ ഉണ്ട്. There is a proof of that. What is that? He had been feeding himself with the dreams of good food and drink at the royal table. Actually, Tile had been dreaming of good food and drinks that he eat on the table, on the royal table of Battenberg. ബാറ്റൻബർഗിലെ രാജകീയമായ ടേബിളിൽ അങ്ങനെ നിറച്ചു വെച്ചിരിക്കുന്ന ആഹാരങ്ങളുടെ കൂട്ടത്തിൽ ഇരുന്ന് കഴിക്കുന്ന ആര് സ്വപ്നത്തിൽ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്? ടൈല് സ്വപ്നത്തിൽ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ടെന്ന് ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്കിനോട് പറഞ്ഞു. That means he was indirectly asking Archduke of Battenberg to get something good food or drink. Look at that next paragraph. The Archduke smiled and said, "Well, my dear fellow, you will certainly have something more solid than dreams to feed on." Archduke ensured Tile that he would get something more solid than he saw in his dream. സ്വപ്നത്തിൽ കണ്ടതിനെക്കാളും നല്ല അടിപൊളി ഫുഡ് തരാമെന്ന് ഉറപ്പ് കൊടുത്തു ആര്? Archduke. Then Archduke asked Tile where his donkey was. What was his reply? The donkey is outside opposite the palace. Tile replied that the Jeff was opposite the palace. Palace opposite ആയിട്ട് ആരുണ്ട്? ജെഫ് നിൽക്കുന്നുണ്ട് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. Then he added some point regarding the donkey named Jeff. ജെഫിനെ കുറിച്ച് കുറച്ച് കാര്യങ്ങൾ ടൈൽ ആർക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുന്നുണ്ട്? ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്കിനോട് പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. എന്താണ്? He should be most grateful. What do you mean by the word grateful? Grateful means thankful. He should be most grateful if Jeff was looked after. The phrasal verb looked after means take care of. Looked after means take care of. പരിപാലിക്കുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. നമ്മുടെ ഡോങ്കി ജെഫിനെ നന്നായിട്ട് പരിപാലിക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഞാൻ ഒന്നും കൂടി എന്താവും? I will be more grateful. Tile said that he should be more grateful or thankful towards Archduke of Battenberg, and he said the Jeff needed a little fodder and lodging at a night. What do you mean by fodder? Fodder is a food that given to animals. Animal food are called fodder. കാലിത്തീറ്റ എന്ന് പറയും നമ്മൾ മലയാളത്തിൽ. And also the lodging. Lodging means shelter. So the Jeff needed a little fodder and also shelter. That's the only thing that Jeff needed. Tile said. Tile പറഞ്ഞു ഇത്രയൊക്കെ അവന് കൊടുത്താൽ മതി. അങ്ങനെ കൊടുക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ he should be more grateful. ഞാൻ ഒരുപാട് എന്തായിരിക്കും? He would be more grateful. ഒരുപാട് നന്ദിയുള്ളവനായിരിക്കും എന്ന് ബാറ്റൻബർഗ്, ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്ക് ഓഫ് ബാറ്റൻബർഗിനോട് പറയാണ്, ഹിസ് ഹൈനസിനോട് പറഞ്ഞു. Then the archduke immediately ordered the donkey to be taken care of, and he added, treat it like one of his own animals. After hearing this, Archduke of Battenberg gave order. കൽപ്പന പുറപ്പെടുവിച്ചു. എന്താണ്? Treat the donkey like one of his own animals. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ അനിമൽസിനെ എങ്ങനെയാണോ നോക്കുന്നത് അതുപോലെയുള്ള കെയർ ആർക്കും കിട്ടണം? ജഫിനും കിട്ടണം എന്ന് ആര് പറഞ്ഞു? ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്ക് ഓഫ് ബാറ്റൻബർഗ് ordered, commanded to the courtiers. Okay, this is what you understood from the paragraph, didn't you? Okay, please go through the same paragraph once again silently. Please go through that paragraph. I think you have finished, haven't you? Okay, then let's discuss the next paragraph. Let's go through the same paragraph once again. I am going to read it. Listen very carefully. Before long, supper was served, and it was like a wedding feast. The tables were loaded with every kind of food and drink. Wine flowed like water. The courtiers stuffed themselves with the choicest dishes. The archduke made Tile eat and drink until his stomach was about to burst. The archduke too ate heartily. His face was flushed with drink, but he seemed lost in thought. He suddenly looked up and said loudly, "Our court painter must paint our portrait, so that we will have the satisfaction of leaving our memory to our descendants. We too have to take our place in history along with our noble ancestors, whose portraits adorn these walls. It is sad to think of deaths, but we do not know when God will think fit to summon us. But our portrait should be painted." What do you understand? Yes, the royal table was filled with a good food and drink for ടൈലിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ആ റോയൽ ടേബിൾ നല്ല ആഹാരം കൊണ്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ നിറഞ്ഞു. വെരി സൂൺ ദി സപ്പർ വാസ് സെർവ്ഡ് ആൻഡ് ഇറ്റ് വാസ് ലൈക്ക് എ വെഡിങ് ഫീസ്റ്റ്. ഫീസ്റ്റ് മീൻസ് സദ്യ. ഒരു സദ്യക്കുള്ള വിഭവങ്ങൾ എവിടെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു? ആ ടേബിളിൽ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ആൻഡ് Tile, Archduke of Battenberg, all the courtiers filled their stomach with their favorite dishes, their choicest dishes and drinks. അവനവന് വേണ്ട ഫേവറേറ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഫുഡുകൾ ഓരോരുത്തരും എന്ത് ചെയ്യാൻ തുടങ്ങി? നന്നായിട്ട് കഴിക്കാൻ തുടങ്ങി. And Archduke made Tile eat up to his stomach burst. That is a sentence. The Archduke made Tile eat and drink until his stomach was about to burst. About to burst. ടൈലിന്റെ വയറ് പൊട്ടുന്നത് വരെ അവനെ എന്ത് ചെയ്തു? ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്ക് ഓഫ് ബാറ്റൻബർഗ് ഇങ്ങനെ തീറ്റി, ചിക്കൻ്റെ കാലും ചോറും ഇങ്ങനെ ഇട്ടുകൊണ്ടേയിരുന്നു. കഴിക്കടാ 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 എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിൽ അങ്ങനെ ഇട്ടുകൊണ്ടേയിരുന്നു. ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്ക് ഓഫ് ബാറ്റൻബർഗ് ഓൾസോ ഈറ്റ് ആൻഡ് ഡ്രിങ്ക് ഹാർട്ട്. വളരെ നല്ല രീതിയിൽ ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്കും കഴിച്ചു. ബട്ട് at a minute he seemed lost in thought. Lost in thought. He was seeing lost in thought. അദ്ദേഹത്തെ നോക്കിയ സമയത്ത് അദ്ദേഹം ഇങ്ങനെ എന്തോ ചിന്തിച്ചിരിക്കുകയായിരുന്നു. And suddenly he looked up and said he wanted Tile to draw his portrait. What do you mean by the word portrait? So that a drawn representation. If you have visited any palace or something, Trivandrum Palace or Ernakulam Palace, you might have seen the portrait of the kings who ruled the kingdom. കൊച്ചിയും മറ്റുമൊക്കെ ഭരിച്ചിരുന്ന ആ പാലസിലൊക്കെ പോയിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾ ഒരു പക്ഷെ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. അവരുടെയൊക്കെ ചിത്രങ്ങൾ ആ ചുമരിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ ഓർഡറിൽ വെച്ചത് നിങ്ങൾ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ടോ? ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് വാട്ട് വി കോൾ പോർട്രേറ്റ്. ഛായാചിത്രം എന്ന് പറയും മലയാളത്തിൽ. സോ ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്ക് ഓഫ് ബാറ്റൻബർഗ് ഓൾസോ വാണ്ടഡ് to draw his own portrait. He wanted Tile to draw his portrait. Why? Yes, he wanted to leave his memory for the descendants. There you can see the word descendants, and also you can see another word ancestors. Descendants means pintudarshakar, the coming generation. Ancestors means പൂർവികർ, forefathers, മരിച്ചു പോയിട്ടുള്ള പണ്ട് കാലത്ത് ജീവിച്ചിരുന്ന ആളുകൾ. So Archduke wanted to leave his memory. He wanted to leaving his memory to his descendants. ഇനി വരാനിരിക്കുന്ന തലമുറ എന്ത് ചെയ്യണം? തന്നെ കാണണം, തൻ്റെ ഓർമ്മകൾ ഇവിടെ നിലനിൽക്കണം. അതിനു വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ് അദ്ദേഹം എന്ത് വരയ്ക്കാൻ ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ടത്? അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ ചിത്രം വരയ്ക്കാൻ ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ടത്. And also the Archduke of Battenberg wanted to be a part of the history, and he wanted to be in the wall. The wall was adorned already with the ancestors who had already ruled that Battenberg. ബാറ്റൻബർഗ് ഭരിച്ചിരുന്ന കുറേ ആളുകളുടെ ഇതുപോലെയുള്ള ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്കുകളുടെ ഫോട്ടോസ് എവിടെ വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്, പിക്ചേഴ്സ് എവിടെ വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്, ആ വാളിൽ വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആൻഡ് യു ക്യാൻ സീ ദാറ്റ് സെന്റൻസസ്. He too have to take his place in history along with their noble ancestors whose portraits adorn these walls. Adorn means decorate. ആ ചുമരിനെ അലങ്കരിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് കുറേ രാജാക്കന്മാരുടെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്ക് കിങ്സിന്റെ പിക്ചേഴ്സ് എവിടെയുണ്ട്? ആ ഒരു ബാറ്റൻബർഗിലെ പാലസിലുണ്ട്, ഓൾറെഡി അവിടെയുണ്ട്. The Archduke of Battenberg, the present Archduke of Battenberg, also wanted to be there with them as a picture. ഒരു പിക്ചറിന്റെ രൂപത്തിൽ അവരോടൊപ്പം ആർക്കും നിൽക്കാൻ ആഗ്രഹം? ബാറ്റൻബർഗിലെ ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്കിന് നിൽക്കാൻ ഒരു ആഗ്രഹം. ബിക്കോസ് he can also be a part of the history along with them. ആ പൂർവികരോടൊപ്പം അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് ഒരു സ്ഥാനം അവിടെ ഉണ്ടാകും എന്നുള്ളത് കൊണ്ടാണ്. Do you understand? Okay, then we do not know when God will think fit to summon us. What do you mean by summon? Summon means call back or invite. That means we can't never expect when God will summon us. എന്ന് ദൈവം നമ്മളെ തിരിച്ചു വിളിക്കും. That means we can never expect when will death come to our life. മരണം എന്ന് വരുമെന്ന് നമുക്ക് എന്ത് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല, പ്രിഡിക്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല, അല്ലേ? That's why, that is also another reason Archduke of Battenberg wanted Tile to draw his portrait. അതും ഒരു കാരണം ആയിരുന്നു. And he said that portrait should be painted. He said to all the courtiers and Tile that portrait should be painted. Portrait എന്ത് ചെയ്തേ പറ്റൂ, വരച്ചേ പറ്റൂ എന്ന് ആര് പറഞ്ഞു? ബാറ്റൻബർഗിലെ ആർച്ച് ഡ്യൂക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു. So from this paragraph we understood that Archduke of Battenberg wanted Tile to paint his portrait, and he wanted to leave his memory for the descendants, and also he wanted to be a part of the history. Okay, do you get me? Then you may please go through the same paragraph once again. I hope you have finished, haven't you? Let me ask you a few questions from the part that we just discussed. Here comes the first question. Do you think Tile and his donkey are hungry? Give reasons for your answer. The answer is, the donkey was not hungry because it fed himself fairly well all along the way on the thorns in the hedges and the grass on the roadside. But Tile had nothing to eat for the past 3 days. Here comes the second question. What does the Archduke want Tile to do? A simple question. Can you answer that question? Yes. The Archduke wanted to paint his portrait so as to leave his memory to his descendants. And here comes the third question. I hope you have answered the first 2 questions that I just asked you, and try to answer the third question. Here comes the third question. What does the sentence, "we do not know when God will think fit to summon us," mean? Yes, it means that death will come as at any time without any warning. Have you answered all these three questions? So in this video, we just discussed the two paragraphs, two important paragraphs. I think you have got a clear idea about the paragraph. So here I am going to wind up. Let me wind up here. Thank you so much. See you in the next video. Bye.